5. I've often noticed that after I had bestowed on the characters of my novel some treasured item of my past, it would pine away in the artificial world where I had so abruptly placed it. Although it lingered on in my mind, its personal warmth, its retrospective appeal had gone, and presently it became more closely identified with my novel than with my former self, where it seemed to be so safe from the intrusion of the artist. Houses have crumbled in my memory as soundlessly as they did in the mute films of yore, and the portrait of my old French governess, whom I once lent to a boy in one of my books, is fading fast now that it is engulfed in the description of a childhood entirely unrelated to my own. The man in me revolts against the fictionist, and here is my desperate attempt to save what is left of poor Mademoiselle. A large woman, a very stout woman, Mademoiselle, rolled into our existence in December 1905 when I was 6 and my brother 5. There she is. I see so plainly her abundant dark hair brushed up high and covertly graying, the 3 wrinkles on her austere forehead, her beetling brows, the steely eyes behind the black-rimmed pince-nez, the vestigial mustache, that blotchy complexion, which in moments of wrath develops an additional flush in the region of the third, and amplest chin so regally spread over the frilled mountain of her blouse. And now she sits down, or rather she tackles the job of sitting down, the jelly of her jowl quaking, her prodigious posterior, with the 3 buttons on the side, lowering itself warily, and then at the last second she surrenders her bulk to the wicker armchair, which out of her sheer fright bursts into a slavo of crackling. We have been abroad for about a year. After spending the summer in 1904 in the Belleau and Abbazia, and several months in Wiesbaden, we left for Russia in the beginning of 1905. I fail to remember the month. One clue is that in Wiesbaden I had been taken to its Russian church, the first time I had been to church anywhere, and that might have been in the Lenten season. During the service, I asked my mother what were the priest and deacon talking about. She whispered back in English that they were saying we should all love one another, but I understood she meant that those 2 gorgeous personages in cone-shaped shining robes were telling each other they would always remain good friends. From Frankfurt, we arrived in Berlin in a snowstorm, and next morning caught the Nord Express, which thundered in from Paris. 12 hours later it reached the Russian frontier. Against the background of winter, the ceremonial change of cars and engines acquired a strange new meaning. An exciting sense of Rodina, motherland, was for the first time organically mingled with the comfortably creaking snow, the deep footprints across it, the red gloss of the engine stack, the birch logs piled high under the private layer of transportable snow on the red tinder. I was not quite 6, but that year abroad, a year of difficult decisions and liberal hopes, had exposed a small Russian boy to grown-up conversations. That says the author's maternal grandmother, Olga Nikolaevna Rukavishnikov, born Kozlov, 1845 to 1901, St. Petersburg, around 1885. And this is a family picture. And it says the author's father, Vladimir Dmitrievich Nabokov, 1870 to 1922, as a schoolboy around 1885, with his 3 brothers from left to right, Dmitri, Konstantin, Sergei. My father was about to graduate from the 3rd gymnasium and enter the university at an astonishingly early age. Uncle Konstantin, at 11 or 12, was still being educated at home. Uncle Dmitri and Uncle Sergei were proboveds, i.e. scholars of the fashionable Imperial School of Jurisprudence. Could not help being affected in some way, in his own way, or on his own, by mother's nostalgia and father's patriotism. In result, that particular return to Russia, my first conscious return, seems to me now, 60 years later, a rehearsal, not of the grand homecoming that will never take place, but of its constant dream in my long years of exile. The summer of 1905 in Vera had not yet evolved Lepidoptera. The village schoolmaster took for us instructive walks. What you hear is the sound of a scythe being sharpened. That field there will be given a rest next season. Oh, just a small bird, no special name. If that peasant is drunk, it is because he is poor. Autumn carpeted the park with vari-colored leaves, and Miss Robinson showed us the beautiful device which the ambassador's boy, a familiar character in her small world, had enjoyed so much the preceding autumn, of choosing on the ground and arranging on a big sheet of paper such maple leaves as would form an almost complete spectrum, minus the blue, a big disappointment, green shading into lemon, lemon into orange, and so on through the reds to purples, purplish browns, reddish again, and black through the lemon to green, which was getting quite hard to find except as a part, at least brave edge. The first frost hit the asters, and still we did not move to town. That winter of 1905-1906, when Mademoiselle arrived from Switzerland, was the only time of my childhood that I spent in the country. It was a year of strikes, riots, and police-inspired massacres, and I suppose my father wished to keep his family away from the city and our quiet country place, where his popularity with the peasants might mitigate, as he correctly surmised, the risks of unrest. It was also a particularly severe winter, producing as much snow as Mademoiselle might have expected to find in the Hyperborean gloom of remote Muscovy. When she alighted at the little Seversky station, from which she still had to travel half a dozen miles by sleigh to Vera, I was not there to greet her, but I did so now as I tried to imagine what she saw and felt at last stage of her fabulous and ill-timed journey. Her Russian vocabulary consisted, I know, of one short word, the same solitary word that years later she was to take back to Switzerland. This word, which in her pronunciation may be phonetically rendered as gidie, actually it was gde with e as in yet, meant where, and that was a good deal. Uttered by her like a raucous cry of some lost bird, it accumulated such interrogatory force that it sufficed for all her needs. Giddy-ay, giddy-ay, she would wail, not only to find out her whereabouts, but also to express supreme misery, the fact that she was a stranger, shipwrecked, penniless, ailing, in search of the blessed land where at last she would be understood. I can visualize her by proxy as she stands in the middle of the station platform, where she has just alighted, and vainly my ghostly envoy offers her an arm that she cannot see. There I was, abandoned by all, calm, la Comtesse Karenine, she later complained eloquently, if not quite correctly. The door of the waiting room opens with a shuddering whine, peculiar to the nights of intense frost. A cloud of hot air rushes out, almost as profuse as the steam from the panting engine, and now our coachman Zahar takes over, a burly man in sheepskin with the leather outside his huge gloves protruding from his scarlet gash, into which he has stuffed them. I hear the snow crunching under his felt boots while he busies himself with the luggage, the jingling harness, and then his own nose, which he eases by means of dexterous tweak and shake of a finger and thumb, as he trudges back around the sleigh. Slowly, with grim misgivings, Mademoiselle, as her helper calls her, climbs in, clutching at him in mortal fear lest the sleigh move off before the vast storm and security increased. Finally, she settles down with a grunt and thrusts her fists into her skimpy plush muff. At the juicy smack of their driver's lips, the two black horses, Zoika and Zinka, strain their quarters, shift hooves, straighten again, and then Mademoiselle gives a backward jerk of her torso as the heavy sleigh is wrenched out of its world, steel fur flesh to enter Fictionary's medium, where it skims along a spectral road it seems barely to touch. For one moment, thanks to the sudden radiance of a lone lamp, where the station square ends, a grossly exaggerated shadow also holding a muff races beside the sleigh, climbs a billow of snow, and is gone, leaving Mademoiselle to be swallowed up by what she will later allude to with awe and gusto as La Steppe. There, in a limitless gloom, the changeable twinkle of remote village light seems to her to be the yellow eyes of wolves. She is cold, she is frozen stiff, frozen to the center of her brain, for she soars with the wildest hyperbole when not tagging after the most pedestrian dictum. Every now and then she looks back to make sure that a second sleigh bearing her trunk and hat box is following, always at the same distance, like those companionable phantoms of ships in polar waters, which explorers have described. And let me not leave out the moon, for surely there must be a moon in full, incredibly clear disk that goes so well with the Russian lusty frosts. So there it comes, steering out of a flock of small dappled clouds, where it tinges with a vague iridescence, and as it sails higher, it glazes the runner tracks left on the road, where every sparkling lump of snow is emphasized by a swollen shadow. Very lovely, very lonesome, but what am I doing in this stereoscopic dreamland? How did I get here? Somehow the two sleighs have slipped away, leaving behind a passportless spy standing on the blue-white road of his New England snow boots and storm coat. The vibration in my ears is no longer the receding bells, but only my old blood singing. All is still spellbound, enthralled by the moon, fancy's rear vision mirror. The snow is real, though, and as I bend to it and scoop up a handful, 60 years crumble to glittering frost dust between my fingers.